I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, March the 31st, brought to you in part by Macrocin by Bimeda, proudly manufactured in North America. Macrocin is proven efficacy at an affordable upfront price with no BS. For more information, go to macrocin.com. Also, Joplin Regional Stockyards in Carthage, Missouri. Busy week at JRS this week. Here today on Monday for the regular feeder cattle auction, expecting 10,000 head. They're going to start at 5 o'clock in the morning. Be lots and lots of long strings. Catfish told me that he had numerous consigners that had several hundred head included. And so be lots of cattle, been together for a long time if you're interested in buying some cattle like that to put on feed. Also later this week, they got a special cow and bull sale coming up on Wednesday, April the 2nd. Starts at 4:30 in the afternoon. They've got a primetime livestock video this week on Thursday, April the 3rd, starts at 1 o'clock p.m. They'll have lots of strings, load lots of feeder cattle and calves on that sale. So check them out. Be sure to keep up to date with what's going on at Joplin Regional Stockyards, and you can watch all of their sales on DVAuction.com. Tricky relationship. Now I'm talking about your direct fed cattle sales in a negotiated basis, and I realize there's a lot more cattle that are sold in a formula or some type of an AMA or something like that. But the only thing that really matters if we're watching the market is the negotiated sales. And so we know that's a small portion of that, but it's a very tricky relationship. It's hard to watch. It's kind of like young love. One minute you think it's going good, and then it goes bad, and then vice versa, and then sometimes they're not getting along at all, and sometimes they're getting along great. But your cattle sellers, especially in the northern plains last week, started out really bold. They thought they mostly priced their cattle at $220, and they thought, you know, we've been gaining $5 or $6 here for the last couple of weeks, and so let's gain that much again this past week. And so they stayed that way until Friday afternoon about. But we had pressure earlier in the week from basis jumpers, especially in the southern plains, you know, guys that were looking at the April live cattle futures, which were trailing the cash market by a long way. Well, whenever you're hedged up, you're betting on the market to go down. So that little gap between the cash and the futures, that's the basis. And you trade that out, trade that paper out and sell those cattle. You get to put that $6 is about what it was, basis in your pocket. That helps add to your cattle sales to reach break-evens or make more profit. So we had some pressure from them. And then we stayed there, just kind of standoff there mid to late week, and then all of a sudden that gap closed on Thursday. That basis closed up pretty tight, not completely, but it closed up enough where people didn't really want to puke their cattle just to get the basis. And so then we didn't see much trade on Thursday either. And then we come in Friday, and for some reason the cattle sellers just got to thinking that maybe these packers didn't need the cattle as bad because they had bought a lot of cattle in a negotiated basis the week before. And even though they were calling for cattle as soon as they made the deal on them, but they just, your cattle sellers kind of lost heart, and your packers won out. Now the packers are always better at this, but the cattle sellers have kind of had the hand here for the last several weeks. But the packers won out this last week, and they got to buy cattle at least on a live basis lower. Now they bought some cattle on a dress basis that end up being higher, and I think your weighted average on dress steers is going to be higher in the 5 area feeding region for this past week when it finally gets all settled up, and I'll tell you about that on our next visit. But we also saw that they're selling cattle down on the border at Santa Teresa livestock. They've been able to get more cattle across the border, so Tato has been having some pretty decent sales there. But starting here April the 2nd, Wednesday, it's going to be tariff time again. Now they did have to pay tariffs for 3 days. You remember he enacted the tariffs, and then they were on for a couple, 3 days, and then he decided to back them off until the reciprocal tariffs start here on April the 2nd. But on Friday, Santa Teresa Livestock Auction sold 104 steers, weighed 721 at $265.50. You think, well, that doesn't sound too awful bad if you're right on top of the market. If you're a couple weeks behind, you think it's higher than hell. But if you're right on top of the market, you think, well, that's not too bad. Well, you add 25% to that, makes it $331.87, like the highest cattle you've ever heard of in your life. If you take that 25% away, it's down to $199.12, and I'm sure a lot of the ranchers in Mexico would not be nearly as excited about that price. How that's going to get taken care of, I don't really know, but it's going to be taken care of on that big price. We can only hope that the cattle that trade direct across the border use the actual real price that the cattle bring to charge the tariff against instead of something less than that. And if there's anybody auditing that, they're smart enough to know the difference. But if they sell through the auction there, it's going to be a big price because those cattle are bringing a lot more than they do direct basis. But let's talk about your board for last week. Actually, heck, let's go ahead and do your kids' corral and your Punchy Pics. It's the last day of the month. Comes around quicker than a pickup payment, but here you go, guys. The kids' corral, which is sponsored by Great Plains Livestock Consulting, and the winner will get a $200 gift certificate to Cavender's Boot City. We'll start out with third place in the kids' corral. That's Colt Morrison, and he just entitled this Spring Break Help. We don't know where Colt's from or anything else. Looking at this, it's a little bit hard to tell whether that's the rankest wheat I've ever seen or ryegrass. But he had some kids, school kids, helping him. They were off for spring break. Some of them go down to the beach, and some of them help their dads, Dr. calves that are turned out. But that's a good pick. How about second place goes to Tammy Addison. Now this is London Gonzalez, and she's 11 years old, riding her pony. And you think, well, what's so wild about that? Well, if you look real close, she's jumping some brush there. And another reason I thought this is punchy, it comes from Lipan, Texas, and that's real close to my buddy Ellison Carter down there, and that's punchy country down there. But if you notice, this little girl is riding this pony bareback and jumping over some brush there. Now, I don't know if she's technically punchy, but in a few years, anybody that wants to draw her eye, they better be punchy, because I tell you what, she's a horse girl now. How about your winner for the kids' corral this month is Neil Ostrand, and this is 6-year-old Merrick Ostrand, and reaching down in this post hole, trying to get some panel pins that had dropped down in there, and they couldn't reach them, so he's helping them reach them. I love this pick. I think it's the punchiest pick we've had in quite a while. But he's helping his dad. They were repairing some corrals there, using some big heavy panels there, and they hadn't yet put that big post in there to tie those panels to, but they hadn't had to reach down in there and get those pins that they had dropped down in the hole, and Merrick was helping that out. So congratulations to Neil. He gets the $200 Cavender's gift card there for the kids' corral. Now, Punchy Pick of the Month. Third place in the Punchy Pick of the Month. This is for all the bells and whistles, guys. Andrew Alderman, and he is picking up a twin calf in Eastern Oregon there. You notice that. That twin calf probably not getting her share of the milk or his, and better just load them up on the horse, get it back to the barn, and probably help it out with a bottle or a nurse cow or something like that. But that's pretty punchy, and it's cool that it come to us from Eastern Oregon. How about second place in the Punchy Pick of the Month? It goes to Dan Vinoy. This is a Vinoy Ranch in Greeno, Montana. They kind of had a wreck there with the rope. They were roping in the branding pin there. roping and dragging, and somehow the rope got looks like under a tail and under a belly or something like that. It didn't look good, but somebody's going down hard right there. But that's pretty punchy pick there as they're doing their spring branding. But the winner, first place in the Punchy Pick of the Month contest for this month, is Lance Anderson. And you look at him, and that shit-eating grin that he's got on his face was probably the reason that he won this. But he'd rather ride that old Hereford steer than he would one of those horses that's tied up on the outside of that wheel corral there. But he better hope that that steer doesn't start bucking, because those braces around the top of that wheel corral are going to make things pretty tight in a hurry. But congratulations to Lance. He gets all the prizes, gets all the big box of swag, stuff coming from NationalBeefWire, Feeder Flash, Beaver County Stockyards, and then of course the whole case of Fair Piece that he can try out. And I don't look like that Hereford steer needs any of that. But let's talk about your board for last week. April live cattle futures, Monday was down 105, Tuesday was up 47, Wednesday was up 70, Thursday was up 247 when it kind of closed that big basis there, and then Friday down 72, with April live cattle ending the week at 208.82. That was up $1.87 for the week. June ended the week at 204.85, up 208. April feeder cattle, Monday was up 12 cents, Tuesday was up 37, Wednesday up $1.02, Thursday up 167, and then Friday some profit taken there, backed off 62 cents, with April feeder cattle ending the week at 286.92. That was up $1.95 for the week. May ended the week at 285.17, and of course that March contract that we've been fooling with for so long, it went off the board right in line with your CME cash feeder cattle index at 286.76. Fat cattle trade. Through Thursday of last week, we had only sold 8,400 head. It was kind of a mixed bag. Some cattle selling near the market, some basis jumping there, but it ranged from 206 to 214, which was up 4 to down 2. Weighted average on live steers just up through Thursday was 212.25. That was about 50 cents lower than the previous week. Dress sales ranged from 330 to 335. That was steady at $8 lower, but they hadn't really sold anything. Weighted average on dress steers up through Thursday was 333.23, and that was about $2 lower because hadn't sold any to speak of. Then Friday happened, and then all of a sudden that tricky relationship all starts coming together, and it come together different than we thought it was going to. Iowa sold 4,600 early on Friday. They had sold about 5,000 more than that earlier in the week. But live sales on Friday, 211 to 214. That was mostly $1 lower on a live basis. Not terrible, but nothing like what they thought they was going to get done. But on a dress basis, 332 to 345. That was steady to $5 higher. Nebraska sold 6,000 on Friday early, 7,600 for the week. Live sales on Friday, 212 to 214. Like I said, about $1 lower. Dress sales 330 to 345. That's going to be higher. Kansas sold a light test 1,650 on Friday. They only sold 3,500 for the week. Prices ranged from 207 to 210 on Friday, but it was mostly 209 in the Southern Plains, and that would also be $1 lower than the previous week. Texas had only sold 700 head by Friday afternoon, and that was at 209, $1 lower. But we'll get some more of the Friday late sales and get the whole weighted average in the 5 area together for you on our next visit. Box beef cutout values were higher again last week. Weighted average on all of last week's choice cut sales, $333.83. That was up $8.30. That weighted average on choice gained $14 in 2 weeks. Big gains there. Your late Friday sales on choice was about $1 under that weighted average at $332.82. Select, your weighted average on all of last week's select sales, $316.46. That was $7.50 higher than the previous week's weighted average. Late Friday select sales were higher than that by $2.20 at $318.68. So select closing the gap there a little bit. All that based on 595 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter was pretty aggressive last week. I mean, we had talked about that. Your packers had made promises for product that they didn't have. They had had some interruptions due to wind and blizzards and things like that. They needed a big week. They needed the cattle, but for some reason, some of your cattle sellers forgot that and gave in. But that's just part of that relationship. But last week's estimated cattle slaughter under federal inspection was 609,000 with a 17,000 head Saturday. And they really hadn't planned on killing anything on Saturday, but they needed to get some catching up done. But that 609,000 was 49,000 better than the previous week and 27,000 better than the same week a year ago. That's big news. That's the biggest news really of last week, was the aggressive slaughter, guys. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market, brought to you by Specialty Risk Insurance, working to ensure your livelihood, guys. Talk about your real-time index. Ended the week at 289.83 based on an 800-pound cash auction steer. That was $1.51 higher than the end of the previous week. Your CME cash feeder cattle index ended the week at 286.76. Sale that's coming up here today on Monday, and I'm going to be driving over there south of Woodward, Oklahoma. CW Ranch and Cattle Company south of Woodward there has got an impressive offering of pairs right off the ranch, guys. I'm not sure how Ron Cunningham has decided to split those up. He's going to sell some smaller offerings there, or he's going to sell them a load at a time, or how he's going to do it. But you get on to DVAuction, go down to the CW Ranch and Cattle Company and check out those videos of those pairs. Very impressive, guys. Talk about your sales last week, your cash feeders and your auctions last week. Feeder steers were steady to $3 higher for the week. Feeder heifers are $3 to $5 higher, with guys being very price conscious as we keep gaining new ground and setting new records like we did all week last week. Steer calves and heifer calves and stockers all sold $3 to $8 higher. So still a big demand for them. And some really impressive sales late in the week, even after they puked the fats. Mankato Livestock in Mankato, Kansas. Look here on Friday. They sold 3 loads of steers right here, all weighing within just a few pounds of 900 pounds, bringing from 290 to 295.25. Wow, that's high. How about Erickson, Nebraska on Saturday? I had the Jim Sweat replacement quality heifers there. 56 head of those weighed 710 pounds and bring 331. How about Fort Pierre Livestock Auction, Fort Pierre, South Dakota on Friday? 8,100 head there. They said the steers were mostly $8 to $12 higher, and the heifers were mostly $2 to $6 higher, but they did have a lot of real reputation consignments in there and a big run there. But the most stick-out deal that I saw out of Fort Pierre on Friday was 57 steers, weighed 852 at $3 smooth, weighing over 8.5, guys. We were only tickling $3 at 800 pounds early in the week, and by the end of the week we were selling 852 pounders at $3. But the most impressive quote that I saw in my entire life, or anywhere last week, especially anywhere late last week or over the weekend, and your Macrocin, no BS, top quote for the day, come out of La Crosse, Kansas. And they actually emailed that to me, and I'm glad they did, because I wouldn't have trusted it just on our automatic feed there. But out of La Crosse, Kansas there, on Friday, they sell 74 steers, weighed 587 at $393, and they were 3 colored kind of steers, guys. That's your feeder flash for Monday.